Well, good afternoon and happy Monday, everyone. I wanted to welcome everyone and thank you all for joining us today for this Jamaica Bay Colloquium session on Diamondback Terrapins. I'm Brett Branco. I'm the Executive Director of the Science and Resilience Institute at Jamaica Bay, or the SRIJB. We are a CUNY-wide institute hosted at Brooklyn College, and we work with New York City, the National Park Service, and an extensive network of partners to support the well-being of people and nature in and around Jamaica Bay through research, education, engagement, and training. So today's colloquium is part of a series of events on the state of the Bay that are being held in partnership with the Jamaica Bay Rockaway Parks Conservancy and the Jamaica Bay chapter of the American Littoral Society. The purpose of this particular colloquium series is to explore current research and data that informs us of the status and trends of conditions in and around the Bay. Today's webinar is the first of 4 webinars that we'll be hosting this fall around the theme of wildlife. And today we're focusing on Diamondback terrapins. Upcoming webinars will focus on fish. So October 16th will be our next webinar with John Waldman, who will be presenting on some recent research on fish populations in the Bay. November, we're still working out the date and the speakers, but we will be focusing on birds. And in December, December 15th, we'll be talking about horseshoe crabs with Mark Botten and Christina Colon. So we're really excited for the wildlife theme this fall, and in the spring we'll launch more webinars under a different theme. Before I turn it over to Alexandra, I just want to acknowledge Thomas Morton, a graduate student at Brooklyn College who has been working with us to organize these webinars and doing a fantastic job of that. So thank you, Thomas, for all the work behind the scenes to make today possible. So without further ado, because we want to really get to Russell's presentation, I'd like to turn things over to our co-host for the day, Alexandra Kanonik from the American Littoral Society, who's going to introduce today's speaker and moderate the rest of the webinar today. So Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Brett. All right, everyone, welcome. Hi. Let me introduce you all to our speaker for the day. Dr. Russell Burke is professor of biology at Hofstra University. Dr. Burke and his lab have been studying the Diamondback terrapin population in Jamaica Bay since 1998. And through these 25 plus years now, Russ and his lab have published a highly comprehensive peer-reviewed body of work investigating all kinds of terrapin and general turtle-related questions. To give you a sense of just how awesome his lab has been, his very first grad student has since described and named a new species of leopard frog for New York City, which, if you think about it, is huge as a scientific accomplishment. And on the terrapin front, so his lab has published lots of different questions and answers on terrapin ecology, nesting behavior, diet, predator relations, early hatching behavior, and many, many more really cool topics that I encourage everyone to do a deep dive on. Dr. Burke and his colleagues have contributed a huge amount to this body of work, and our general understanding of terrapin conservation issues and population changes for the Northeast. And so with that, I humbly hand the floor off to Russ. It's all yours.
Well, thank you, Alex, for that very flattering introduction, and thanks to Brett and Thomas for the introduction to speak with you here today. What an honor to be the first speaker. I'd like to think that that's in part because of my accessibility, and you guys have heard me speak before, so I'm happy to talk about one of my very favorite topics. I'll happily talk about terrapins and our work on terrapins. I think we've been very fortunate and done a lot of fun things along the way, and I have some interesting results to talk with you about. Let me move this out of the way and I can make that a presentation. There we go. Give me just a moment more to clear off my screen and then I'm good to go. All right, so what I'm going to talk about today is really what we, some of the things that we've learned over the 25 or so years that we've been working on terrapins at Jamaica Bay, and talk a little bit about what's next, what we plan to do for the next 25. Oh, I gotta switch here. There we go. So first, let's talk a little bit about terrapins themselves. Some of you are maybe have never seen a terrapin or have only seen them a little bit, and they are such wonderful creatures that there's really lots of things to say about them. This is a picture of an adult female and adult male. Lots of neat things to see here. One is that these are ocean-going turtles, but they are not like marine turtles, great big things. Also, that females are considerably larger than males, and I'm going to talk almost exclusively about females here today for reasons that I'll explain a little later on. And we hope that much of what we say applies to the males as well, but males are considerably less well known than the females. Females have, both males and females have these great big webbed back feet. They're very powerful swimmers. They can swim very quickly, and they're actually pretty hard to catch in the water if you're swimming after them. Terrapins and marshes go hand in hand. Salt marshes, Spartina marshes in particular, go hand in hand with terrapins. You do not find terrapins, with very, very few exceptions. You don't find terrapins where you don't find Spartina marshes. Spartina marshes are critical to a number of aspects of their life history, including their diet, their overwintering behavior, and a number of other things. As a result of their dependence on Spartina marshes, terrapins have this very linear distribution all along the Atlantic coastline and Gulf coastline, from Massachusetts down around the peninsula of Florida and into the Gulf of Mexico. And there are some places where terrapins don't actually live in salt marshes, but live in mangrove marshes. But those are a minor part of the range, and really it's Spartina marshes all the way through. Now, I love terrapins because they're just amazingly cool animals, but there's lots of other reasons why you should like terrapins too. For one thing, we have some preliminary data from a variety of places up and down the range that suggests that terrapins are important keystone species. A big part of that comes from the fact that they are big predators on invertebrates, a variety of invertebrates, and it looks like they actually change the structure of their vertebrate communities through the predation on some species and the fact they don't eat some others. So as a result of that, they structured the invertebrate communities, and some of the invertebrates they really like are in turn big herbivores on Spartina marshes. So terrapins are one of the animals that feed on the snails that feed on Spartina. So in a way, they're protecting their own habitat, and they are important consumers of those predators. Also, terrapins come on shore and lay eggs, and those eggs amount for a huge amount of calories that are eaten by animals on land, and by it turns out also used by plants, and therefore they fuel terrestrial ecosystems along the salt marsh edge and the ocean edge, and those calories are probably very valuable to many terrestrial systems. Furthermore, terrapins are seed dispersers. They eat the seeds of a number of different plants, and they carry them pretty long distances and then deposit them someplace else. And therefore, they're likely to be important seed dispersers. We know a lot about their diets. We know that terrapins eat a lot of these mud snails. They also eat a lot of other crunchy things. They eat the Spartina grass itself, also cordgrass. They even eat larger things like blue crabs and soft-shell crabs, and they do this by actually crushing those shells in their powerful jaws. Terrapins do have very strong jaws. I don't recommend that you get bitten by one. It's a bite you're likely to remember. We also care about terrapins because they are strong indicator species. They don't live every place there are salt marshes, and they also, are ways that, if we don't have terrapins around, something is the matter with the system around you. If you have all the pieces for terrapins but no terrapins, something's going on. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute here. They are highly charismatic. Turtles in general are loved by lots and lots of people. Baby turtles are really, really cute. And people really enjoy seeing turtles doing things. In my many years of traveling the trails of Jamaica Bay and watching terrapins nest, I can tell you that lots and lots of park visitors come to Jamaica Bay in part to see terrapins nest in June and July. It's one of the places where you can see that. And watching a turtle complete, such an important part of its life cycle can be a deeply moving experience. And so I think that while we appreciate looking at all sorts of different animals, terrapins have a special place in the hearts of many people. Now, terrapins have been around, been associated with people for a long time. They've almost certainly the Native Americans ate lots of terrapins. Because that would certainly make sense that they would. They're readily available. They're really not very dangerous. They're pretty easy to handle and pretty easy to collect. During the 1800s and the early 1900s, there was a brief couple of decades when terrapins were very popular as food items for people in America, and they were collected all over throughout their range, including here in New York, and shipped around the country. This photograph on the bottom left with the guy with the barrels there holding a couple of terrapins, that was taken in Chicago. So these are terrapins that were on their way to market, some from someplace on the East Coast, on their way to market someplace else. So barrels and barrels and barrels of terrapins were collected and shipped around the country. Terrapins were so valuable for a while that people looked into farming them. Here in the bottom right, you see a guy hand feeding terrapins at a terrapin farm. Turned out not to be very commercially viable, and the fad died out, and the market for terrapins disappeared. So there's not a big legal market for terrapins anymore. On that fact, as we'll talk about in a minute, the market is just about gone. However, the impacts of this linger today in the fact that terrapin populations throughout much of the range were devastated back then and have been very slow to recover. One of the reasons that they've been slow to recover is because of habitat loss. Humans have been building on marshes and destroying marshes for a very long time. With the earliest, even before we had heavy duty machines to do this, people did this by hand, by just dumping refuse. But now, of course, more recently, of course, people have had large scale machines for doing this on a big scale. This is actually a steam engine, a dredge that's destroying a marsh. And nowadays it's done on a much larger scale. Marsh loss still goes on now, even though much of it has been outlawed. Marshes are still lost in a variety of different ways, and this is contributes to the problems for terrapins. Terrapins are also impacted by as incidental catch and crab traps that you see here on the bottom left. In many places, the terrapins are impacted by cars and vehicles as they cross roads. And then we know that there's some impact due to pollution and ocean level rise, but this is fairly well undocumented so far. But terrapin populations really never recovered from the heavy harvest in the 1930s, and their habitat loss has continued to have a lot of detrimental effects on the populations. Partially as a result of their low numbers and their difficulty in rebuilding their numbers, they are protected by state law in every state that they occur. Here in New York, it is illegal to collect native species generally, so people cannot legally collect terrapins without a permit. Specifically, the harvest of terrapins is prohibited, and in most places where people place crab pots, terrapin excluders are required by law, and so that we're hoping that those sorts of protections will help terrapins. The IUCN lists terrapins as threatened because of declining populations in lots of places, including New York, and it's therefore international trade with them has some types of restrictions. So we live kind of in a hotspot of research on terrapins. In addition to our work here, primarily here at Jamaica Bay and also at JFK, with the two places I'm going to talk about today. There's also research is done at Staten Island. There's research on terrapins that's been going on for many years at the Meadowlands and in Flax Pond. The Marine Nature Studies Center in Oceanside, New York, has had a monitored population for a bunch of years now, and now for several years we've been working with out at Orient Beach State Park. So there's a number of other sites, and then on a shorter term, there's a number of other sites where some research is going on. So among all the places throughout their range where terrapins occur, Long Island and the surrounding area actually has a fair amount of research projects that have gone on or are currently going on. For the most part, I'm going to talk to you about work that's been done by my students and my colleagues and I at Rulers Bar Hassock there in central Jamaica Bay. And so that's that island right there in the middle of the bay. As you can see, it is pretty centrally located in Jamaica Bay. And most of you are probably aware that you can reach it by train, and you can out to Broad Channel. You can also reach it by car. The highway takes it across Bay Boulevard, goes straight from Howard Beach across Rulers Bar and on out to Rockaways. So it's a pretty accessible island. It's got a big freshwater pond over on the east side, but most of the work that I've done has been done over here on the west side. And as you can tell, Jamaica Bay is most of the land and a lot of the water, a lot of the shorelines are owned and managed by the National Park Service. Another big chunk of it is owned and managed by the city of New York as city parks, and there's some private inholdings in there as well. But for the most part, it is a lot of that land has some degree of protection. Now, Jamaica Bay is a really, really interesting place to work. Most of the research that's been done on terrapins elsewhere has been done in relatively pristine habitat. In other words, habitat that is not nearly so dramatically impacted by people. Jamaica Bay, on the other hand, has a really long history of serious pollutants of every major kind you can think of, largely due to its proximity to New York City itself. And so lots and lots of different pollutants have gone into Jamaica Bay, which makes it an interesting mix. In addition, Jamaica Bay has had a long, long history of marsh loss, some of it quite deliberate. Lots of the marshes in Jamaica Bay have been deliberately destroyed, especially along the shoreline. And some of it accidental because of the changes to the freshwater flow and changes to the ocean bottom, the bay bottom, that some of it's been dredged up. It's made a lot of changes to the water flow and the sediment flow within Jamaica Bay. And as a result, marshes are very unstable in Jamaica Bay. All of them are losing ground, some of them much faster than others. In addition, there was a little bit of work that was done on terrapins in Jamaica Bay in the early 1980s, when early on in the national park years. That work showed that egg survivorship was really, really high. The early park workers said that they never saw predation on eggs, and there were no nest predators there. And this made it really a remarkable thing. When I came along much, much later in the late 1990s, and I read about this very unusual place, I was really struck with the idea of working in a place where there are no nest predators and where egg survivorship is really high. So that made it really an interesting place to consider working. So we started working in the late 1990s, 1998, and my very first grad student, Jeremy Feinberg, who Alex mentioned early on, was absolutely critical in getting this going. He was the one who started all this. He's certainly responsible for all that. And we started doing work then on basic population ecology. We wanted to know how many terrapins there were and what was affecting the population sizes, whether it was going up or down. And given that this was the first urban population of terrapins to be studied, we were very curious how it differed from the non-urban populations. We focused on eggs and hatchlings and adult females right off the start, as many people who study terrapins do, because those are the ones that come on land, and that makes them much, much, much easier to study than the ones that are in the water. So we really focused on what terrapins were doing in June and July, that is during the nesting season. And the rest of the year is pretty hard to track. And when I say we, I mean we. This is just a tiny, tiny sample of the large number of people, mostly volunteers, who have contributed to this work over the decades. We every year had people come out who had some time and were interested in helping out with some research. And there's Alex right here. So over the years, we've had many, many volunteers. Certainly over the years, we've had over 1,000 people working on the project. Some of them very short term, some of them for many came back year after year, some of them students, some of them teachers, some of them retirees. some of them letter carriers. We've had a really wide variety of people over the years. And so every data point that I talk about in the rest of the talk today, you should keep in mind, comes from this collection of volunteers. So thanks to all of them. So on a regular basis, we did the things that population ecologists usually do. I'm a population ecologist by training, and this was just par for the course. We find animals in the field, we make observations of what they're doing, we mark and measure animals. As you see right here, I'm putting a pit tag in a terrapin, and here's a terrapin being measured with rulers. We observe indirectly. Sometimes we observe what happened by collecting data from the field after things happened. We sometimes dig up nests and count eggs and measure eggs. We also wanted data on hatchlings, so that meant we often caged nests, and when the hatchlings emerge, we collect data on the hatchlings as well. This is this simple set of 8 pictures that I just showed you here. It was really the nuts and bolts of almost everything that we do. So early on, I was very interested in knowing where the terrapins of Jamaica Bay nest. And we spent a couple of years going around to all of the potential nesting sites and looking for nesting females, looking for nests, looking for predated nests to see where the nests were. We spent a lot of time mostly on the islands, but also on the shorelines. And these are the results of that. We found that the vast majority of nests were right there at Ruler's Bar, and that's why we focused our attention there. We didn't do much work out at the Rockaways because so much of that has got barrier walls to keep the terrapins from coming up. There are other places that we didn't spend much time. We didn't do much work. We didn't go out to JFK because we talked to people there who told us that there weren't very many terrapins there, and we weren't going to be allowed to walk their shorelines anyway. So we really focused our attention at Ruler's Bar. I want to point out that this survey was done back in the very early years of our studies in 2000 and 2001. And then I'm going to summarize some of our general work over the first decade or so. We found that the terrapins were laying as many as 3 clutches per year. Sometimes we would catch a female 3 times in a year, 3 separate clutches. The average clutch size is about 13. With some pretty wide variation, but a lot of them are around 13. As I said before, nearly all the nesting takes place in June and July. And we found, contrary to what we'd initially thought, raccoons eat about 93 to 98% of the eggs. First, it's important to note that in other parts of the range, there can be a whole suite of nest predators, things that dig up the nest, eat them, foxes, skunks, coyotes, all sorts of things. At Jamaica Bay, raccoons are by far the major predator, but there are no skunks or fox or coyotes out there. We do get some predation by beach grass and other plants. I'm not going to talk about that much here today, but that's a separate and interesting topic all by itself. But raccoons by far are by far the most important predators here. And I want to remind you that I said just a minute ago that there were no raccoons in Jamaica Bay, at Ruler's Bar in the 1980s when the Park Service people first started there. So we found 2 dramatic changes in those couple of decades from the 1980s to the late 1990s. One was raccoons were there, and now predation was really high. We spent quite a bit of time studying predation by raccoons. We've learned a lot about it. Some of the things we've learned are that most of that predation occurs in the first 24 hours after the nests are laid. In fact, if the nest can make it past those first 24 or 48 hours, their chances of making it through to hatching are really good. We've done some work to figure out exactly what it is the raccoons are using as cues, and it appears to be that it's the scent of the freshly dug soil. Many of you are familiar with the smell that freshly dug up soil has. Raccoons use that to figure out where to dig, and they're highly effective at finding and finding those nests and getting every single egg out of it. At our site, they almost never leave unpredated eggs. In fact, we found that if it rained, if by chance it rained in the afternoon, after terrapins had nested in the morning, the chances of a nest surviving predation were improved dramatically, and the more rain there was, the better the chances. And this matches our observation about the nest smell, because the rain apparently washes away that smell and makes it much more difficult for the raccoons to find the nests. We've done quite a bit of work on hatchlings. I'm not going to talk about that too much here today, but I will point out that we were lucky enough to work out a technology for tracking hatchlings, and we found that hatchlings are eaten by a very wide variety of predators, including rats and raccoons and a number of different bird species. So getting out of the nest as a hatchling is by no means a safety protection altogether. The life is still very perilous after emergence as well. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit more long-term data rather than just the short-term studies. We initiated right from the get-go, we started collecting data on the number of nests that we observed being laid at Ruler's Bar. And as you can see here, we were getting in the first several years of the study, documenting about 2,000 nests, which is a very high nesting density, and was very, very impressive. But then there was a dramatic decline, and you can see that by the time we stopped collecting data on this in 2012, the number of nests had dropped by about half. And in fact, that is the case still, that the number of nests has gone down dramatically, and we were really puzzled at first as to why this was. Is this because the number of females had died, or a number of females had left and were nesting someplace else, or maybe the same number of females existed, but they were laying fewer nests, or something of that nature? Any of these things were possible. So this dramatic decline in nests was a puzzle to us. I'm going to switch gears here for a few minutes and bring another story in line here, and then I'm going to come back to that question about the declining nests a little bit later on. In 2009, something very surprising happened, and that is that all of a sudden we heard about massive numbers of terrapins coming up and trying to nest at JFK Airport. Some of this is very comical. There's lots of stories and lots of text messages and chats and stuff that are going on about this, and they're really amazing. This is a picture of a pickup truck from Jamaica Bay. I'm sorry, from JFK, with terrapins in the back. JFK Airport, like nearly every other airport in the United States, has a wildlife team which do quite a huge amount of wildlife work. And suddenly, for the first time ever, this forced them to pay attention to terrapins, and hence this is one of their trucks loaded up with terrapins from one short period of time, collecting terrapins off the runways. Lots of stories about this came out in the news. It was all over the place. And this, by the way, this picture that was of a news story, these are red-eared sliders. So somebody needed a picture of a bunch of terrapins, and somehow grabbed what they could. Just for a little background here, I should point out that our study site right here in the center of Jamaica Bay, not very far away from the JFK Airport, and this is the site where a large amount of the nesting takes place, all along here and along this one runway right here. So not very far away. And again, so some of the key features here is it's relatively close to our Ruler's Bar site, and it was a very sudden influx of terrapins, something that they had not seen in previous years. It turns out this increase was real. This was not something that had been going on all along. The wildlife biologists at JFK collect data on all their wildlife encounters. They collect data on the number of terrapins they've moved off runways, the number that were struck by planes. Both of those data sets tell the same story of year after year after year of relatively small numbers of terrapins encountered. And then there in 2009, 2010, 2011, a huge jump in the number of terrapins that they encountered both on runways and struck by aircraft. So the result of that was that we worked with the wildlife biologists at JFK, and they adopted a lot of our marking techniques. And so they started collecting data on terrapins, just like we had over at Ruler's Bar. And they have marked thousands of terrapins over there, just like we have marked a little over 1,000 terrapins from Ruler's Bar. They've marked close to 3 times that many over the same time period. So they have they've quickly built up a very substantial terrapin population over there. To answer one question which we had right away was, maybe this solved our mystery of what happened to our nesting females. Maybe some of our nesting females were moving over to JFK and nesting over there instead. Well, it turns out that's very unlikely to be the case. Over the years that they've been collecting data and the years that we've been collecting data, only a very small number of terrapins have ever been caught nesting at one site that were previously nesting at the other, and vice versa. So it looks like, well, whereas a small number of terrapins might nest at one site and then another year nest at the other site, it's pretty rare. It doesn't happen very much. And these are relatively independent nesting populations. One group of terrapins nests at JFK, a different group of terrapins nests at Ruler's Bar. All right, so this is the guts of my presentation today. I want to take a few minutes to talk about this. After many years of collecting data at both of our sites and using the mark recapture data, marking a bunch of terrapins and then using their recapture rates to estimate population sizes, this is what we find. We find that at Ruler's Bar, there's been a steady decline in the population over the years that we've been studying it. This is 15 years worth of data. And what we see is that it's been declining overall, it's declined about 36% over those years. And this is a very substantial decline in the population. It doesn't mimic the 50% decline that we saw in nest numbers, but it's in the same ballpark, and it probably reflects what's really going on at Ruler's Bar. This population is declining rapidly, and it certainly is a very serious decline. JFK population, you don't see, it doesn't look very steady here, but I'll point out that these kind of population estimates are partially influenced by the number of years you've been collecting. That tends to smooth out the data. Also, their effort has changed dramatically year to year. Some years they're able to put a lot more people on it than others, and so it looks a little jumpier than it probably is. But their population has stabilized more or less in the 3,000s range. And it looks like that population is pretty stable. So the long-term population trends are that Ruler's Bar population is steadily declining. So the national parks, the population that nests on the national park is steadily declining, and the population that nests at the airport is staying pretty steady at about 3 times or 4 or more times the size. Now, real question is, why is that? What's driving these differences? So some of the factors that we want to consider are, first is bycatch. There's always been some crab trapping going on in Jamaica Bay, and many other places where terrapins occur. Crab traps catch terrapins, and when they do, terrapins usually drown. This picture here is a particularly horrible one with a bunch of dead terrapins pulled out of a crab pot. We know that crab trapping still goes on in Jamaica Bay, and certainly terrapins are killed by crab pots. Currently, Jamaica Bay is not covered by the bycatch reduction device requirement, and that means that crab trappers there are not required to put excluder devices on their crab pots. Also, we know that sometimes people collect terrapins at Jamaica Bay. There's been a number of Park Service police interactions where they've found people collecting terrapins. Removing females from the population like this, of course, is devastating to a population of turtles. And to the extent that goes on, that's a really big problem. We also know, because we've seen it in a number of different ways, that terrapins are hit by boats cruising around Jamaica Bay. And sometimes those boat impacts are fatal, as in this picture you see here on the right. Other times, the boat impacts only cause less fatal injuries. We actually have quite a bit of data about major injuries from the turtles at Ruler's Bar. And we know that individuals with that as many as 17% of the females at ruler bars have had major injuries, and the ones with the turtles who have major injuries, not surprisingly, have much lower survivorship than the ones who don't. So those injuries may not be immediately fatal, but over time they tend to lead to an early mortality for the animals that get hurt. Indirect human impacts are diverse, and it's really pretty hard to come close to listing all the possibilities. Humans, of course, are responsible for raccoons getting out to Ruler's Bar. Either the raccoons got out there by crossing the highway, the bridges, or we, of course, know that people have released raccoons out at Ruler's Bar. And so the island went from 0 nest predators to 98 or so percent nest predation as a result of the raccoon introductions. Marsh loss is ongoing in Jamaica Bay. This is of course, the important habitat for terrapins, and the causes for marsh loss stem from human activities. So our 25 years of work so far has really highlighted the fact that we've got 2 different populations, which are actually looking pretty different in some interesting ways. And we hadn't anticipated this from the beginning, but it certainly looks like we've got a really interesting possibility for comparing 2 pretty close populations. The Ruler's Bar population has relatively low survivorship rate. The JFK population has a higher survivorship rate. We found that the Ruler's Bar population took a big hit when Hurricane Sandy came through. JFK population appears not to have been impacted significantly. We get much higher rates of injuries in the Ruler's Bar population than in the JFK population. The Ruler's Bar population is declining steadily. The JFK population appears to be steady. In addition, the Ruler's Bar population has high nest mortality. I didn't talk about this much, but I should mention here that the JFK population has much better nest survivorship. We've also done quite a bit of work on diets, and we know that there's no difference in diets between the 2 populations, no differences in clutch size. The Ruler's Bar population in general, the animals are older, which makes sense given that probably recruitment is much lower, and at JFK, a lot of the animals are from the result of that late 2009 influx in the population. But surprisingly, the animals at Ruler's Bar, their body sizes are growing faster than the JFK population is, and that's a puzzle that we haven't been able to work out. So far of these couple of decades of work, we have a pretty good idea of nest and egg survivorship, especially at Ruler's Bar. We know pretty well how terrapin hatchlings survived their first winter. We know pretty well, we've got a pretty good handle on adult female survivorship and some of the factors that affect that. Some of the big questions that we're really looking forward to are what are the terrapins doing when they're not nesting? So we know a fair amount of what they're doing in June and July, but we don't know what they're doing the rest of the year, and that's probably a big part of the mortality of the adult females is during the rest of the year. We'd love to know, therefore, what's causing that decline in the Ruler's Bar population. And given the fact that the JFK population caught us by surprise, we'd really like to know if there are other nesting populations in Jamaica Bay that somehow we missed or that have come into being since we did our survey in 2000. So our next set of projects have to do with tracking females. And 2 summers ago, we started putting satellite tags on adult females. The tag technology that's out there right now is really only appropriate for adult females. The tags are too big for adult males, so unfortunately they're still going to be a mystery to us. But we're really interested in discovering overwintering sites. We want to know more about where they forage, we'd like to know more about their nesting sites and their movement from one nesting site to another. And we're very curious about the degree of overlap and activity between the JFK population and the Ruler's Bar population. We're a couple years in on this project, and so I can talk to you a little bit about it. We're only a couple years in, and so we still have a lot of questions. So this is the active track of one of our terrapins. A couple summers ago, I guess last summer, and you can see that this track doesn't pick up with the beginning of the when we release the terrapin, but you can see that over the course of several days, starting in late June, this terrapin crossed over a significant fraction of the bay. And just to give you some landmarks right here, this is a terrapin that nested here at Ruler's Bar and was released right here. The track that picks up here is a couple days later is over here at Canarsie. And I'm going to wait. You can see it moves over here back to where it nested, and then it goes. It must have gone around one way or the other around the island, and then gone over to Joko Marsh over here. Spent a lot of time over at Joko, and then crossed back over again to the western part, and then back over to Joko again. So this track alone tells us something that we really had not known at all, and I wasn't even sure I would have guessed was possible. The terrapins are making movements between what I thought of as two relatively separate nesting populations very, very regularly. So this is what I would have called a Ruler's Bar animal, and you can see that it spends quite a bit of time over on the east end of the bay. By the way, I should point out that this tracking work and this animation and the next ones I'm going to show you here were done by my graduate student Carissa Howe, and so kudos to her for getting this cool stuff together. Here's another one. This is an animal that was originally marked at, captured and released over at the airport. You can see it spends a lot of time over here at Joko and nearby marshes on the east side of the bay. And this one is much more of a homebody than the previous one. Stays much closer to home for most of the time here, back and forth and back and forth. These are different days, of course, and so this one's staying home. And then it shoots across the bay and spends a little time over at Canarsie and Yellow Bar, and then back again, and then back again, and then back again. So this certainly suggests that these animals are very, very capable of crossing from the eastern part of the bay at the airport over to the central western part of the bay over at Canarsie and surrounding areas. And that's something that we just really had no idea was going on. And I've got just a little bit more along these lines. There's another airport animal that right away after release went straight across the bay and hung out over near the marshes near Canarsie. Okay, so these are just, at least in my mind, amazing things to see, very surprising, and opens up lots and lots and lots of new questions that we had not considered at all. We've spent relatively little time around these islands here, not thinking that they were terribly important to terrapins, and obviously they're more important than we thought. Oh, I've got one more here. All right, I have one more slide here to show you, and that is this one shows home ranges for a number of different animals. So those occasional movements clear across the bay, if they were short term, don't play a role here. Where do our terrapins spend most of their time? And this is the home ranges of 14 different animals. You can see that from this point of view, if you look at summaries of their movements, you can see that they really are, for the most part, pretty much homebodies. The JFK animals pretty much stay over at JFK, except for those occasional forays. There's another group of animals that these are all nesters at Ruler's Bar Hassock, and so these are all animals that stuck around there. Some of those animals nested over here on the southern side of Ruler's Bar, but then left up here and spend most of their summers over here. And these are summer locations, summer home ranges, I should say, and it suggests that we do have, for the most part, we have separate foraging habitats for these different populations, but clearly they break that mold and forage in the other sites or visit the other sites with some regularity. Okay, I'd like to wrap up by thanking the many people who've helped along the way here. Alex, who introduced me here, has played a tremendous role over the years. Our our contact and help at the airport. Laura Francoeur has also been very helpful, and we've had lots of help from many other people, far too many to list here, and lots of volunteers over the years. If any of the people who've helped us over the years are listening to this this presentation, I thank you as well for your contributions. Okay, and I am going to stop sharing here. And I'm going to hope that I've got some questions that people want to have asked along the way. I can see 18 things in the chat and a couple Q&As as well. So I will be happy to take any questions. Alex, how would you like to proceed?
Oh, first of all, Russ, thank you for the awesome presentation. That was really cool. We have kind of a mix of questions in the chat and in the Q&A. I'm going to start outwards and move in. Don Reepe's question is the outwards one. Actually, it's relevant too, since we have Spartina marshes here, but once you go further south along the range, there's no more Spartina marshes. It changes up into mangroves. Do you know what the status of terrapin populations are down Florida, the Carolinas, compared to Northeast?
Terrapin populations are really affected by local factors so dramatically. You know, for example, places where people crab trap a lot, they can decimate a terrapin population in a year. So it's not a regional thing so much. It's really, you know, local specifics. So places where crab trapping and march loss have not been really serious problems, terrapin populations can be relatively healthy. I mean, the JFK population shows us that under the right circumstances, populations of terrapins can grow quite rapidly. So I would say that, you know, different, even similar appearing marshes might have very different terrapin populations.
Okay, thank you. And now bringing it in, I'll do the next question in the Q&A for Margot. She was asking, because you mentioned the motorized boats, do we know if there's data available on the impacts of motorized boats or water treatment plants on terrapin populations? Maybe if not for here, but like down the region? I know we have some here, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of data on impact. We've certainly seen lots of terrapins come up to nest that have had everything from the minor impacts from boats to major impacts. They wash up dead sometimes. So all that, you know, that full range of things has happened. And other people have noted similar things in other places. So it's a pretty well documented trend. It's not even just terrapins. You know, freshwater turtles and sea turtles everywhere have similar impacts with boats, and again, the full range of injuries from minor to fatal. So it's not an unusual thing at all. We know that the populations that from Ruler's Bar get impacted far more often. I assume it's because they're spending more time in places where people are boating.
Michael asks, in the clutch of the eggs, are they all the same sex? Are they mixed? What are we seeing for Jamaica Bay?
Well, Michael's probably referring to the fact that the terrapins have temperature sex determination, which means that the sex of the eggs is not settled until they're incubating, and it's all determined by how warm the nest is. We have not sexed a very large number of nests because, for the most part, that requires sacrificing hatchlings to sex them. But we have we do have indirect ways of doing that, and there's certainly some of the nests are all one sex, or some of them or all the other. That's probably true of the majority, but terrapin nests are big enough and they can be temperature stratified enough that you can get both sexes out of a single nest. So that definitely can happen, but probably most of the time it's one sex or the other. And our data suggests that most of the nests are producing females. We get most of the nests are fairly shallow, and at least at our site, at the Ruler's Bar site, most of the nests are producing females.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next one is also more nest specific, now on hatchlings. So Rhonda asks, can you discuss what do you know about hatchlings? What do they do in the winter in Jamaica Bay?
Yeah, it's a great question, and if you'd asked asked us, before we started this, we would have given a very, very different answer from what I would say now. Most turtles, as most people know, they hatch out of the egg and they make a dash for the water because water is safety and land is dangerous, and water is safer anyway. I mean, there's plenty of dangerous things in the water, but it's safer than the land. Terrapins, on the other hand, completely caught us off guard when we found that they hatch out. Many of them hatch out in the fall and turn around and head further inland. And they move further inland and they bury themselves under the ground. They wait out the winter and then come back out in the spring and make their way to the water in the spring. Now, some of them do go down the water in the first fall, and some of them do overwinter in the nest that they were laid in. They'll hatch in the fall and then ride out the winter in the nest. But a large fraction, probably 40 or 50%, hatch out of the nest or leave the nest in the fall, and as I said, move their way upland and rebury themselves upland. This has been replicated at another site in Rhode Island, and other people are seeing this too. So it's a really, really strange behavior. It's not known in any other turtles, and it's a mystery why terrapins do this. It's a great subject for somebody to study.
Yeah. All right. And now let's see. There was one more thing, a couple of others. Okay. So now adult questions. Neha asks, because I know you've done studies on diets too a little bit. She
Sure.
asks, do terrapins prey on blue crabs? Do they only eat juveniles, or do they have predation strategies for the adults? Do we know anything about that?
We do, because as you mentioned, we've done quite a bit of diet work. And mostly what we do is after a turtle has finished nesting, we'll hold it in a pan for a couple of days and let it poop out anything that it wants to. And we can look at that and identify what they've been eating. And we've seen, I'm trying to think, what's the biggest blue crab claw piece that we've seen? They break them up, so they can break through a pretty good sized piece. I guess the biggest claw piece I've seen is going to be here. I'm going to measure it here since I'm right here with a ruler. It's going to be about 3 or 4 centimeters long. So whether it broke off, that terrapin, grabbed a crab and broke off a piece, they drop pieces pretty readily. Whether it foraged on a dead one, maybe, I mean, that could be too. I don't know, but they definitely are taking pretty good sized pieces off of crabs, including the claws themselves, which are pretty rugged, you probably know. Terrapins have powerful jaws. They can certainly crack that. Think about, the tools you use to break open a crab shell when you're eating a crab. Terrapins bites are like that.
Okay. And the next one, I think, actually is a really good segue from Sherry to talk about something I'm super interested in and I would love to hear an update on. Sherry says, when tagged terrapins move across from east to west, it appears that part of that recorded journey includes moving on land. Is that correct? I think this is a great opportunity for you to talk about the satellite tags and what the tracking data you've been collecting so far.
That's almost certainly not correct. The way the tag analysis works is, every time the turtle comes to the surface, if it's there when there's a satellite going overhead and it's there for a moment or two, it doesn't take long, a second or two, it establishes a contact with the satellite and it tells, the two of them work out where the turtle is. If the turtle's underwater, then it's not sending a signal. And so if the turtle comes up and sends a signal and then goes underwater and then swims a long way and then comes up again, then we've got a point where we've got 2 points with signals, and automatically the software packages draw a line between them. So if the terrapin was on one side of the island and then went down and then made its way around the north end of the island and came up and continued on, and we didn't happen to get any points along that whole path, the way the software will draw it is as it went over land. I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I'm nearly positive that they're not going over land to make that trip. They're making their way around. In a few cases, in the ones I showed, you could see them making their path around the north end of the island. They may go around the south end of the island too. I come to think of it, I don't think I've seen that in any of the trails, but maybe. I would expect that to be true too. So no, I'm sure they're not going over land.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Okay, and I'm checking through the questions. I answered a few in the chat to folks. I don't see any new ones.
Okay.
And I don't see any new ones in the Q&A. But if folks have any more, please feel free to drop them in.
Yeah, Russell, this was fantastic, and one of my take homes from this is that just like almost anything in nature, the question about how are terrapins doing is a complicated question. I think if we had just seen the Rulers Bar data, we might have come to a conclusion, but then as we bring in the Jamaica the JFK data, it adds some complexity to the story that makes it hard to say something very general about the trends in the populations. However, I think we did learn a lot about all the different factors that are impacting Diamondback terrapins in the bay and how interconnected a lot of these issues are. So that's one of my big take homes from this. So thank you for doing that, Alex. Thank you so much for doing a fantastic job hosting and moderating this session. And then just to close, and our next webinar is going to be October 16th, where we'll be talking with John Waldman about fish in Jamaica Bay. So thank you all for joining. We really appreciate it and hope to see you again in October. And with that, we will close.